All right, well, today we're going to be doing something a little bit different on the channel compared to the usual. Instead of working on the Land Cruiser, we're going to be working on my shop. So if you follow the channel for a while, you know that I've had this thing since around last October, and I'm still not in the shop yet. And the reason is, to be totally transparent with you guys, it's expensive. It costs a lot of money. Building this is like building a second house. So not only do we have to pay for the shop, we have to run electrical out here, and that involves trenching 220 feet to the power line to the shop, which isn't that big of a deal, but the wire has to be ran by the city, and it's very expensive. It's thousands of dollars. Then once it gets into the shop, we have to actually run the electrical in the shop, and that's also expensive. Even if I were to do it myself, still a lot of money. And then I have to think about how to get cars into the back half of the property. So that's gonna require landscaping, fixing slopes to get into the backyard, using gravel or asphalt or cement or something to actually make a way back here. Not to mention the front area of the shop needs some sort of drive so that we don't track mud in here. That part can wait. And lastly, I really want to coat the concrete or seal it or do something because it's brand new, it's really nice, and I don't want to mess it up. That's what we're going to be doing in this video, is sealing the concrete. I don't have the sealer yet, it hasn't showed up, but I do have it ordered. We're going to be using GhostShield 4500 and 8510. It's supposed to be really good to just kind of harden up and seal this concrete, to repel oil, repel water, and do all that. So while we're waiting for it, I'm just going to get started sweeping out the shop, cleaning everything up, mopping it, and then once it gets here, we'll probably do the same thing again just to be sure, and then we'll lay it down and get everything sealed. So the reason that I chose GhostShield over epoxy or some other coating like polyurea or whatever is because it just seems more practical and way more affordable for what I want to do in this shop. This will be a working shop, and that means there will be welding, spatter, grinding, motors being dragged on stands, tools flying, parts dropping, you get the picture. And it seems that I've heard a lot of stories about epoxy and similar coatings chipping and not being able to withstand the abuse. And of course, that's all in the prep and what the product is laid down, but overall it just seemed easier and cheaper and better for me to use GhostShield. And that leads me into the next reason, which is cost, which in my opinion, it's so expensive. In order to get an epoxy floor or polyurea or anything similar, I received quotes from multiple companies from between $7,000 to $13,000, which is so prohibitive that it would make me not want to even be in the shop. I'd be so scared to damage it, and I wouldn't want to work in there. I'd be obsessing over the floor about damaging the floor or chipping it or something like that. So the GhostShield seemed to be the most affordable solution for me, which is going to work well for my needs and allow me to work in the shop without caring about damaging the floor, which costs as much as a down payment for a cheaper house. And if I ever have to recoat it, apparently you just spray it right back on in 8 to 10 years like nothing ever happened. So it seems to be pretty simple. Anyway, the prep work is super important here, and even though nothing has ever been in this shop and the concrete is relatively clean, it's still not clean enough to the point where I want it to be. So I'm just going through and sweeping and mopping and rinsing out the shop multiple times before the product gets here, and then we can get started on sealing up this concrete once it's all clean. Well, the shop's about as clean as it's gonna get. I've went through and I've mopped this probably 3 or 4 times, rinsed it, scrubbed it, done everything I can to get the concrete as clean as possible. And I think at this point we're just gonna have diminishing returns. I'm just gonna keep going until I try to get it perfect, and it's never gonna happen. So we're calling it good here. The GhostShield showed up today, and now we're ready to coat the floor. So we got the 4500 and we have the 8510. The 4500, this one is a primer for the 8510. So this is a densifier and a hardener. Supposed to actually reduce the dusting on the concrete as well, and this is just kind of a primer for this next step, which is the Siloxa Tech 8510. And this is what actually seals the concrete and prevents us from absorbing water and all sorts of chemicals. It repels oil, and this is what's actually going to make the biggest difference in the shop. But we have a storm coming through tonight. It's supposed to last a couple days, and you can't apply either of these when it rains. And yeah, I know we're in an enclosed building, but it seeps under the garage doors, and it's gonna potentially interfere with our coating. So the 4500 goes on first. We're gonna put that on right now. It has to sit for 5 to 7 days, and then we'll lay down the 8510 probably next weekend, and we should have a nice sealed concrete floor. So the 4500 is a concentrate, and we have to mix it 1-to-1 with distilled water. So that's what we're doing here. I already have about a gallon in this sprayer. So we're just gonna mix the 4500 into this and then start spraying it down. You can roll it on, brush it on, do whatever you want, but to me it seems like the sprayer is the easiest option, so that's what we're going with.
The 4500 is a single coat application, and it was pretty easy to apply, but I noticed that it was going a long way, which it sounds like a good thing, and it is, but I have 4 gallons of this stuff and I need to use it. So after the first square, I started going a little bit slower and slightly heavier on the coat for the rest of the shop, and it seemed to work out pretty well. There was some slight puddling, but I was able to brush it out with no issues.
All right, well, that is 1 gallon of the 4500, and we have 4 for the whole project, and I don't think we're gonna use it all. Maybe we will. I still have about a gallon of that mixture left in the sprayer. We've already done like a 12 by 36 area right here, so we might have some leftover product, but I guess we'll see.
Well, it's been about 5 days since we laid down the 4500, and now I'm carrying these 5-gallon jugs out to the shop of the 8510. And the 8510 is like a siloxane-based fluorocarbon. I don't know, I feel like I'm just making up words, but basically it's really good at resisting and repelling water, oil, road salts, stuff like that. And this is gonna be what actually protects the concrete. So I'll lay it down right now.
Well, as you guys can see, the 4500 laid down perfectly. There's no residue anywhere. That was one of the warnings on the label, was there might be residue if you lay it on too thick, but we rolled it out after I put it on, so we don't have any issues with that. And you can see it's finally a nice sunny day outside. We've been having a lot of rain out here, so I haven't been able to get back out, but today's the day we're laying down the 8510. So the 8510 says that it can cover 300 square feet with 1 gallon per coat, 2 coats required. Now each square you see on the shop floor is 144 square feet. They're 12 by 12. So we are probably gonna use 1 gallon per 2 squares. And so there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's 12 squares in here. Geez, couldn't remember what came after 8 right there. So we have 10 gallons. We should be able to cover the entire shop with all of the 8510 that we have. I also picked up a 4-gallon backpack sprayer that has Viton seal. It's supposed to have better chemical resistance, and it states that in the instructions. I don't know if I have to have it, but I don't want to be halfway through this job and the seals blow out. Not sure if that would happen, but if it did, it would suck because I'm supposed to lay down coats wet on wet, and if I have to go run to the store to buy a new sprayer, it's gonna ruin everything. So we're gonna pour it in the sprayer now and start laying it down. I should probably get a respirator. This stuff doesn't smell very good. Well, I'm not sure how you're supposed to apply the second coat without walking on it, so I just brought a pair of flip-flops out here and I've been walking on it and applying the second coat. So I guess we'll see if we have a bunch of footprints all in it, but I think we should be good because it seems to be kind of leveling itself out. But yeah, it's applying on pretty easily, no big issues. Smells really bad. Make sure you get a respirator if you do this. Not to mention it's turning it into like, not a mist, but it's turning it, it's in the air, and you're definitely gonna breathe it, so you're gonna wanna use a respirator. And Yeah, it's laying on pretty evenly. I think the best way to do this would have probably been to get those little like spiky shoes they use for epoxy, but flip-flop's gonna have to do. All right, I got all the product laid down. The nice weather quickly turned to bad weather and it started raining, but the area that it hit, which is this spot right here, already started beating up the water, which I thought was interesting. A couple puddles in there I'll have to brush out or broom out, but for the most part, looks pretty good. Just a tip, if you're doing a similar kind of project, you're probably gonna wanna buy those little spiked epoxy shoes. They have spikes on the bottom, so when you walk, you don't leave a footprint. You guys saw I used flip-flops and they were clean, and this stuff would probably just level itself out anyway and look fine, but what I ended up doing was taking a leaf blower and walking backward and blowing away my footprints as I walked backward, and it actually seemed to work pretty well. So if you're planning on doing something similar, you might want to do something like that. As far as the product, I still have 5 gallons left, and I think it's because I have a power troweled, I think that's what it's called, a smooth like troweled finish. So it's not as porous, it's not absorbing the product as well as it would if it were like brushed or something. So once it starts drying a little bit more, I think I'm just gonna spray the remaining 5 gallons in the highest traffic areas, and then we'll come back in 5 days and see how this stuff does. It's about 5 days later, and as you guys can see, for the most part, the shop is all dry. There were a couple of problem areas, I think because how smooth the concrete was with the addition of the densifier, where it didn't want to absorb, so it really did take all 5 days to suck all this product in. And it's still drying, but for the most part, it's done, and I think we're ready to test this and see how it does against oil, antifreeze, and water. So this is an area of the shop that's already pretty well cured right here. It's been dry for like the last 3 or 4 days. And I'm gonna put some oil, antifreeze, and water on the surface of the concrete and see how it does. So we'll start with the water, see if it just beads up. Yeah, look at that. It doesn't absorb into the concrete at all. So that's really interesting. And if we were to wipe that up with a towel, we got nothing. So I'd like to see how that does with the oil and the antifreeze. Let's go ahead and put the oil on the surface now. I'm okay with this area of the shop kind of getting dirty. So if it does happen to stain, I'm okay with it. So we got the oil, and we'll put down the antifreeze. Look at that, just beating right on the surface like that. And then we'll do a cap full of water as well. Same way. We'll just do that right here. Look at that, just all of them sitting on the surface. So we have the water, the oil, and the antifreeze. And I think I can just wipe all that stuff right up. It's the moment of truth for the GhostShield. Let's see if this stuff wipes up. It's been sitting for about 5 minutes. Let's see how it does. Wow. Yeah, try doing that with untreated concrete. That would literally never happen. It would have already absorbed right in. We have no residue at all. It doesn't even feel like oil was on the concrete. My hands are clean. Wow, that's crazy. Let's try it again with more water. I'm just gonna dump it and see what happens. That's so weird. Look at how it just starts kind of forming into a group and then just puddling away. It's not absorbing at all into the concrete. How interesting. Take a little science experiment on the channel. Wow, that's weird. Look at that. Just immediately groups up and doesn't absorb at all. See that? How cool. Nice. Wow. Well, we are now one step closer to moving into the shop, and I think all we really need to take that next step is to move my tools out here and get some lights mounted, and I think we're gonna take care of that in the next episode, so stay tuned and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Later.